Welcome to Psyche Talks. Today, we're diving into something really fundamental, something that, well, shapes almost all our interactions. The science of persuasion.
That's right. It's everywhere. Every single day, we're trying to influence people, whether we think about it consciously or not.
Totally. Getting your team on board with an idea, maybe trying to convince your kids about homework,
Right.
or even just like picking a place to eat with friends.
And most of the time, we just wing it.
Yeah.
Right? We rely on our intuition. We think, okay, what would convince me?
Or just kind of stumble through, hoping for the best.
Exactly. But what's fascinating is that decades of solid research in psychology, behavioral science, it consistently shows our gut feelings, often pretty off base when it comes to persuasion.
It's so true. You'd never build a bridge based on just a feeling.
Right. Or manage a big investment portfolio that way.
You'd get the experts, the data. But with human behavior, with influence,
Yeah.
we all interact with people constantly, so we think, oh, I've got this figured out.
Yeah, that overconfidence is a real trap. It's a huge missed opportunity, actually.
It means we end up using strategies that aren't very effective, or sometimes ones that completely backfire.
Definitely. But the good news, and this is key, is that persuasion isn't some kind of, innate magic. It's not just art.
It's science.
It is science, and it can be learned. So this deep dive is all about unpacking some of those really powerful research-backed insights.
Insights from the sources you shared with us. The goal is to help you be more effective in your own life.
And, maybe just as crucial, more aware of how others might be trying to influence you.
We're going to look at how tiny changes, just a few words sometimes, can have these massive ripple effects.
Yeah, some really counterintuitive stuff. Why admitting a weakness can actually be a strength, for instance.
And we'll touch on those foundational principles, the bedrock ideas.
Right, like the ones Robert Cialdini famously outlined. Reciprocation,
Feeling like you owe someone back.
authority listening to experts,
Mm-hmm.
commitment and consistency,
Sticking to what you've said or done.
scarcity wanting what's rare, liking saying yes to people we like, and social proof.
Looking to others to see what they're doing. These are sort of the pillars.
They are. But the real juice, what the sources really get into, is the application. The specific techniques, the studies. That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, let's jump right in then. Social proof seems like a great place to start. It's so common.
Absolutely. The core idea is simple. We look to other people's behavior to guide our own, especially when we're uncertain.
And especially people we think are similar to us.
Exactly. That hotel towel study you mentioned earlier is a perfect illustration.
Right, the hotel is trying to get guests to reuse towels. The usual signs were all about save the environment.
Which appeals to values, sure. But what happens when you leverage social proof instead? What if you just tell people what other guests are doing?
That's the key change. The sign that said something like, the majority of guests who stayed in this room reused their towels.
Precisely. And that one small change in wording. Guests who saw that sign were 26% more likely to reuse their towels compared to the standard environmental message.
26%. Just from changing a few words. That's incredible.
It really is. It tells you that appealing to the norm, showing what others like them are doing, can be much more powerful than just trying to activate abstract values.
Okay, so intuition says values, but the science clearly says look at your neighbors.
Pretty much. But, and this is a big but, the sources emphasize, you have to be really careful which norm you highlight. You don't want to accidentally promote the wrong behavior.
Ah, yes. The petrified forest example, they had a problem with theft, right? People taking bits of wood.
A huge problem. So they put up signs trying to stop it. Signs saying things like, your heritage is being vandalized, 14 tons stolen each year.
Trying to shock people into behaving, but it backfired.
Massively. Instead of deterring theft, the sign essentially advertised just how common it was.
Oh, wow. So it became negative social proof.
Exactly. It screamed, lots of people are stealing wood. So visitors thought, 14 tons. Guess everyone's doing it. Maybe I should grab mine before it's gone.
Yeah.
It normalized the very behavior they wanted to stop.
Okay, so the critical lesson is always frame the desired behavior as the norm. Talk about the majority who do recycle, not the minority who don't.
Precisely. Focus on the positive norm. We see this pattern in energy conservation studies too. When homes got feedback comparing their energy use to neighbors, the ones using more than average tended to cut back. They moved towards the average.
That makes sense. Social pressure, wanting to fit in.
Right. But here's the fascinating, slightly weird part. The magnetic middle, as you called it. What about the homes already using less energy than average?
Don't tell me. They started using more.
They did.
Yeah.
They also drifted towards the average, but in the wrong direction for conservation efforts. Being told they were below the norm actually encouraged them to increase consumption.
Get out. That is so counterintuitive. Doing better makes you worse.
It can, if the feedback only highlights the deviation from the norm. This is where the sources point to the importance of adding a symbol of approval.
Ah, the smiley face.
Exactly. When the energy reports put a little smiley face next to the usage data for the low-energy homes, it stopped that backfire effect. It signaled approval for their good behavior.
So it wasn't just about the norm, it was about recognition too. The smiley face reinforced, you're doing great, keep it up.
Precisely. The frowny face for high users didn't add much. The norm itself did the work there. But the smiley for low users was crucial.
Okay, huge takeaway there for anyone managing people or projects. Don't just focus on problems. Acknowledge and approve of those already doing the right thing. Praise the punctual folks, not just chasing the late ones.
Absolutely. And think about testimonials. That's social proof too. Make them relevant. If you're selling to, say, dentists, get testimonials from other dentists, not tech CEOs. People need to see someone like them.
If it worked for Dr. Smith down the street, makes sense. Okay, let's shift gears. Reciprocity. This feels deeply ingrained.
Oh, it is. The urge to repay favors, gifts, kindnesses, it's a fundamental social glue.
The restaurant candy study is a great example of this, isn't it?
It really is charming. So waiters give a small candy with the bill. Tips go up compared to no candy. Okay, makes sense. A little gift.
But the kicker was how they gave the candy, right?
That was the key. If the waiter gave one candy per person, then paused, looked him in the eye, and offered a second one, saying something like, actually, here's an extra one just for you folks.
Tips went up even more.
Significantly more. It wasn't just about getting more candy. It was the perceived personalization, the unexpected extra gesture. It felt like a genuine, specific kindness.
Ah, so it has to feel authentic and directed at me, not just an automatic handout.
Exactly. That personalization makes the reciprocity urge much stronger. The application. Be the first to give. Offer help. Share information. Extend a compliment before you ask for anything.
Like that customer service example, complimenting the agent first.
Yeah, genuinely acknowledging their help before you launch into a complex problem can tap into that reciprocity. They feel appreciated, maybe a little obligated to go the extra mile for you.
Sneaky good. But there's a time limit on this, isn't there? The sources said favors are like bread, not wine.
Huh. Yes, exactly. The feeling of obligation fades over time.
Yeah.
So if you've done someone a favor, the window to, let's say, benefit from that goodwill isn't infinite.
And if you need to remind someone, gently.
Very gently. Maybe frame it as recalling shared value, not calling in a debt. Hey, I was just thinking about that report I sent over. Did it end up being helpful for that presentation?
Subtle. Okay, let's talk commitment and consistency. Our deep need to act in line with what we've already said or done.
Hugely powerful motivator. This is the principle behind the famous foot-in-the-door technique.
The drive carefully sign study.
That's the one. Researchers asked homeowners to put this huge, kind of ugly drive carefully sign on their front lawn.
Yeah, I wouldn't want that.
Those people didn't. Only about
Yeah.
17% agreed. Predictable. But with a different group, they first asked for something tiny. 2 weeks earlier, they asked if they'd put a little 3-inch "Be a Safe Driver" sticker in their window.
Harmless enough, most people probably said yes.
Almost everyone did. It's a small ask, aligns with being a good citizen.
Okay, so they got the small yes, then what?
2 weeks later, they went back to those same people and asked about the big, ugly sign. Compliance leaped from 17% to 76%.
Wow, 76%. Just from that tiny sticker beforehand.
Isn't that incredible? Agreeing to this sticker subtly shifted their self-perception. They started seeing themselves as the kind of person who supports safe driving. So when the bigger request came along, saying no would create cognitive dissonance, they felt compelled to act consistently with that new self-image.
So the nugget is, small initial commitments pave the way for larger ones because we want to be consistent.
Exactly. You see it in sales, start with a small purchase. Fundraising, ask for a tiny donation first. Even parenting, break down chores into smaller, easier to agree to steps.
And there was that other fascinating finding, just asking people to predict their behavior.
Oh yeah, the voting study. Researchers called potential voters and simply asked, do you plan to vote in the election?
And that question alone boosted turnout.
By about 25%. When you ask someone if they'll do something socially desirable, like voting, they almost invariably say yes. Making that verbal commitment, even implicitly, makes them more likely to follow through to stay consistent.
That's amazing. It reminds me of the restaurant no-show example.
Right. Just changing the script from please call if you have to cancel to will you please call if you have to cancel. The hostess waits for the customer to say yes. That active commitment cut no-shows from 30% down to 10%.
Just adding will you and getting that explicit yes. It's wild.
It taps into that consistency drive.
Mm.
And related to this is the labeling technique.
Right. Telling people they seem like a certain type of person.
Yes. Telling potential voters they appear to be above-average citizens likely to participate made them more likely to vote. Telling kids they seem like the kind of students who really care about good handwriting actually led them to practice more.
So applying a positive label, as long as it feels somewhat true or aspirational to the person,
Can encourage behavior consistent with that label. It shapes their self-perception, again, tying into consistency. And making commitments active, writing them down, saying them aloud, makes them even more potent.
Got it. Small steps, predictions, labels, active commitments, all playing on consistency. Now, for something that feels totally backwards, turning weaknesses into strengths.
Yeah, this one definitely goes against intuition, admitting something negative.
It feels like shooting yourself in the foot.
Right. But think about some classic ad campaigns. Volkswagen Beetle. Ugly is only skin deep.
Avis, we're number 2. We try harder.
Progressive Insurance, showing you competitor rates, even if they're sometimes lower. They all lead with a perceived weakness.
Why does that work? It builds trust.
Exactly. By openly acknowledging a minor drawback first, you gain enormous credibility. It signals honesty. Wow, they're willing to tell me the bad stuff too. So when you then highlight your actual strengths, people are much more likely to believe you.
Like the study with lawyers.
Yes, mock trials showed that lawyers who preemptively mentioned a small weakness in their own case before the other side could pounce on it, they were seen as far more trustworthy and were ultimately more persuasive.
Okay, so the nugget. Admitting a small, genuine flaw up front disarms the audience, builds trust, and makes your subsequent positive points way more believable.
Crucially, it has to be minor. You can't lead with, the engine might explode. It has to be something secondary that doesn't undermine the core value.
Good point. Okay, what about the compromise effect? Choosing the middle option.
Yeah, this is how retailers often structure choices. When faced with a range, people often gravitate towards the middle ground. It feels safer, less extreme.
The Williams-Sonoma bread maker story illustrates this perfectly.
It does. They had a bread maker selling well at, say, $275. Then they introduced a new deluxe model for like $425.
Right.
Significantly pricier.
And you'd think that might hurt sales of the original or just sell a few fancy ones.
Right. But what happened? Sales of the original $275 model almost doubled.
Get out! Introducing a more expensive one made the cheaper one sell better. How?
Because the original $275 model was no longer the expensive option, it suddenly became the reasonable, mid-range, compromise choice compared to the new $425 Anchor. The super premium model made the original look like a sensible default.
Ah, it reframed the original as the middle ground. So the nugget is positioning your desired product as the compromise between a lower and a significantly higher option can actually boost its sales.
Definitely works for product lines, service tiers, even things like hotel rooms. Offering a standard view, and a premium balcony room often makes the standard view look most appealing.
And taking away that top tier option could hurt the middle one.
It could, because it's no longer the safe middle. Fascinating psychology. Okay, let's talk about the power of a single word. Because.
The copier study. Ellen Langer's classic work.
That's the one. Someone needs to cut in line at a copier. Baseline request. Excuse me, 5 pages. May I use the machine? Gets about 60% compliance.
Makes sense. Adding a reason should help.
Right. Add a good reason. Because I'm in a rush. Compliance shoots up to 94%. Totally logical.
Okay, but the shocker was the bad reason. Right.
The non-reason, basically.
Right.
Excuse me. 5 pages. May I use the machine because I have to make some copies?
Which is obvious. That's why you're at the copier.
Exactly. It adds 0 new information.
Right.
But compliance, 93%. Almost identical to the good reason.
No way. Just hearing the word because was enough.
For a small request like 5 pages, pretty much yes. The word because acts like a heuristic trigger. It signals a reason follows. And for low-stakes requests, our brains often take a shortcut and just accept it without deeply analyzing the quality of the reason.
Mind blown again. So, nugget for small asks, always give a reason, even a flimsy one, starting with because, but size matters here too.
Critically, when they changed the request to 20 pages, a bigger imposition that flimsy because I have to make copies, reason had no effect. Compliance stayed low, around 24%.
But the good reason still worked.
Yes, because I'm in a rush. Still nearly doubled compliance for the large request, up to 48%. So the crucial distinction for big requests, the reason following because needs to be legitimate and persuasive. The word alone isn't enough when the stakes are higher.
Okay, recap. Always use because. For small things, any reason works. For big things, make the reason count. And maybe flip it. Ask your customers why they use you. Get them to say, because.
Great application. Getting them to articulate their reasons reinforces their own positive feelings. Okay, quickly, let's touch on fluency and trust. Basically, how easy something is to process affects our judgment of it.
Like the effort involved in thinking of reasons.
Exactly. That BMW versus Mercedes study. One ad asked people to list 10 reasons to choose BMW. Another asked for just one.
10 reasons is
Yeah.
a lot.
It's hard. And because the task felt difficult, people actually ended up rating BMW less favorably than when they only had to think of one easy reason. The difficulty of recall bled into their judgment of the brand.
Wow. So if you want someone to feel good about your proposal, make it easy for them to generate reasons in favor. Ask for just one or two strong points.
Right. And maybe, if you're being strategic, ask them to list many reasons for a competitor's product, hoping the difficulty makes it seem less appealing.
Clever. And this fluency idea applies to language too. Simple is better.
Yes. Studies show that using clear, simple language and even simpler company or stock names makes things seem more familiar, trustworthy, and even intelligent. Overly complex jargon often backfires.
And rhyme. Rhyming makes things seem truer.
Weirdly, yes. Woes unite foes is judged as more accurate than the non-rhyming equivalent, troubles bring enemies together. It's a cognitive shortcut. Rhyme creates fluency, which we misattribute as truthfulness. Advertisers know this well.
Sneaky. Okay, another quick one. The progress principle.
The idea that seeing progress towards a goal is highly motivating.
Like those coffee shop loyalty cards.
Exactly. A card that starts with, say, 2 stamps already punched out feels like you got a head start. People are much more likely to complete that card than one that starts completely empty.
It creates momentum.
It does. So the application. When asking for help or motivating someone, frame the task in terms of progress already made. We're already 40% done with this report, or your skills in X mean you're basically halfway there already.
You're anchoring them to progress, not just the remaining work. Nice.
And self-awareness, mirrors and names.
Yeah, subtle effects. Studies suggest things like mirrors in a room or even just asking people their names or having them wear name tags can increase self-focus. This can subtly nudge people towards more socially appropriate behavior, less cheating, less littering.
Interesting. And finally, let's talk about when things go wrong. Admitting fault.
Super important. The JetBlue example after that massive snowstorm meltdown is classic.
Instead of just blaming the weather, which many airlines did. Their CEO went public, took full responsibility, and specifically blamed internal controllable factors like their own systems and procedures.
Which sounds risky, like you're admitting incompetence.
You'd think so. But the research and the real-world reaction showed the opposite. When companies or leaders attribute failure to internal controllable things, we messed up the process, our planning was inadequate, they're actually perceived as more trustworthy and competent.
How come?
Because it suggests they understand the root cause and, crucially, have the power to fix it. If you just blame external factors like weather or the economy, you sound helpless. Taking responsibility implies control and a path forward. Studies even showed companies doing this had better stock performance later on.
Wow. So the nugget is, when you screw up, own it quickly. Blame internal, controllable factors and outline your plan to fix it. Builds massive trust.
It really does. Okay, so we've covered a ton. Social proof, reciprocity, commitment consistency, weaknesses, compromise. Because fluency, progress, self-awareness, admitting fault. These are powerful tools.
Absolutely. And it brings us to the ethical dimension, which is crucial. These aren't tricks for manipulation.
They shouldn't be. Used ethically, they're about building genuine connection, highlighting real value, facilitating cooperation. They're tools for effective, honest communication.
But used dishonestly, trying to artificially create scarcity or fake social proof.
That leads to short-term gains, maybe, but long-term disaster for trust and reputation. The sources are really clear on this. Like that gas station owner who jacked up prices during a crisis made a quick buck, but lost all his customers forever once the crisis passed. Ethical application requires honesty and genuine value.
And knowing these principles isn't just about potentially using them yourself, it's defensive too, right? Being a more critical thinker.
Exactly. That's almost the more important part for navigating daily life. You are constantly surrounded by attempts to influence you, marketing, politics, everyday requests.
Hmm.
Understanding how these techniques work allows you to recognize them. Is this appeal to authority legitimate? Is this scarcity real or manufactured? Is this free gift really free? Or designed to trigger reciprocity for something I don't want?
So you can look past the technique and evaluate the actual merit of the message or request.
Precisely. It empowers you to make conscious choices based on substance, not just react automatically to psychological triggers. It's about understanding the mechanics of influence.
So the final thought really is about awareness. As you go through your day, start noticing these principles in action. In ads, in negotiations, maybe even in your own interactions.
Yeah, just recognizing them is the first huge step towards making truly informed decisions in a world that's constantly trying to persuade you.
Thank you for your support and for listening.